Welcome to the Yoga Therapy Hour podcast with Amy Wheeler. I've had the good fortune to travel the world learning about yoga therapy on a global scale, and I've been able to meet many of the leaders in the field along the way. I want to share with you what I'm learning as I interview our colleagues from around the world. My hope is that together we can reduce suffering of all sentient beings through our work as yoga teachers and yoga therapists. This podcast episode that you're about to listen to with Amy Wheeler and Amy Weintraub, it really felt like just having tea with a girlfriend. And in fact, Amy and I are very good friends. So if you get that sense of you're kind of a fly on the wall as we just talk about what we're passionate about, that's exactly how it unfolded and kind of what I wanted. One of the reasons I asked her to come on to talk about yoga for mood disorders and yoga for depression specifically. Amy went into great detail today about her anxiety-based depression. And I feel like today's podcast was such a really practical discussion about how to regulate mood, how to regulate depression. Exactly what are some of the tools that you can use to bring yourself into a more energized state or a more relaxed state. And she even went into this combination of different tools, combination of mantra during asana and how you can kind of energize the body, but focus and calm the mind by doing mantra while you do your postures. This is something that I love, and I learned it through Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandiram, the home of my yoga lineage. And it's exactly what we talk about in our January mental health module. So every January, we have a 9-day module where we're talking about anxiety and depression and insomnia and bipolar and schizoaffective, and how is it that we can use the different tools in the yoga therapy toolbox to mix and match when both the body and the mind have gone into mania? That's one option. Or maybe the mind has gone manic, but the body is very sedentary and lethargic. And what combination of tools can you use when the mind and the body have gone in two different directions? And how do you energize the body and at the same time calm the mind, right? So whether we're talking about anxiety or depression or insomnia or bipolar, it's the same thing to do an assessment on the person in front of you from the yoga perspective, from the ancient yoga texts and philosophies, and then choose which tools, whether it's back bends or forward bends, whether it's energizing mantras or soothing mantras, or maybe balancing type mantras, whether it's inhalation-based pranayama or exhalation-based pranayama. There's so many different tools in the yoga and yoga therapy toolbox to help stabilize, regulate, and even bring self-awareness to the state that we're in, because maybe we are traumatized and we're not even embodied enough to feel and sense, what do I need right now? So I got really excited listening to Amy, because what she's been doing for decades is exactly what we do in our January mental health module. And then we continue that. There's a second mental health module every July, where for 9 days we talk about things like ADHD, OCD, phobias, post-traumatic stress, childhood trauma. All those things kind of clump together. Also, addictions is in the July module. And again, how do we become more aware of what it is that we're sensing in our body and feeling, and also what kinds of things are going on in our minds? And what are the tools in the yoga toolbox that are most likely going to help the mind either elevate or bring it down and ground? What is going to help in the body to shift the body? Because whatever mental health issue that we're experiencing, it's not just in the head, it's actually in the body too. So this conversation just was so affirming to me, knowing that I'm on the right track with our January and July mental health modules. Because when I hear someone that I haven't studied with, she hasn't studied with me, and we've both, throughout all of our years and decades of study and teaching, come to the same conclusion, that makes me feel like it's true. It's real. There's something there. We've seen it work with our clients. And, really, this is the reason why the Optimal State Yoga Therapy School has a primary focus on mental health. It's not that we don't do physical health in terms of backs and knees and shoulders and all that, but I truly feel it's the mental health that's driving the physical health. And so we have to really understand yoga therapy for mental health to see how that is then manifesting in the physical body. So I think you're really going to enjoy today's podcast. I know I loved hearing from Amy and all about the different products she's created over the years, the different teaching curriculum that she's done, and how she helps herself and how she's willing to admit that she too struggled with anxiety-based depression and was able to use yoga and breathing and postures and meditations and affirmations and mantras to help lift her out and eventually titrate down off of medication. So enjoy, and we will be right back with you. Hello, today I have Amy Weintraub with us, and I am so excited to help her promote this new exciting Yoga for Your Mood card deck that was released by Sounds True last Tuesday, August 10th. And Amy, I just thought, before I even get into your bio or anything, I thought it might be really fun for you to take us through one of the practices, one of the mudras that is on the card deck as kind of an auspicious beginning for our session today.
Yeah, thank you for that invitation. I'd love, let's see, for those of you who are watching this card, it's number 32 in the calming series, is Hakini Mudra. I call it finger pushing because I want it to be as accessible to non-yogis as possible, because as yoga therapists, we are in all kinds of settings. So before we actually do Hakini, which is really simple, I'd like to do a little experiment, and some of you have probably tried this on your own before. Simply press your little fingers together and allow the eyes to soften or close. So the tips of the little fingers, and then notice where the breath is landing in your body. And then release the little fingers back into a loose fist and press the tips of the thumbs together. And notice if there's a shift. This is very subtle. The mudras are subtle. Where is the breath being welcomed? And then back to the little fingers. Do you notice the difference? And then just out of curiosity, let's try the ring fingers. Is the breath shifted at all as it lands in your body? And releasing the ring fingers, the middle fingers. Are you aware of a shift? And then releasing the middle and the index fingers, the tips, the pointer fingers. What are you noticing? Where is the breath being welcomed? And then thumbs, press the tips of the thumbs together. Beautiful. And then all the fingers and the thumbs together. What are you noticing? Where is the breath finding its home? And this is the mudra that's on the card. So with that, if you wish, you may even wish to, on the inhale, use I am. On the exhale, here. I am on your inhale. Here on your exhale. Grounded, ready. And then as you're ready, you can allow the hands to float down and the eyes to flutter open. So, what did you notice anything, Amy? I mean,
I really did. Yeah. And I can never remember which of the fingers is which elements. I always have to look it up. But when we did the pinky fingers, I was all up. It was like, and as soon as we went to the thumbs, I was like, boom, back in my chair, embodied, grounded. Wow. And then when we went to the middle fingers, I was like, oh, I'm just right in my solar plexus. This is me, you know. So now I want to go back and look at which fingers are which elements, because I really believe that it is connected to that. And in fact, I'll try to pull it up right now.
Well, if you may or may not wish to do that, because, and it's really interesting, we experience it in different ways. But in general, I would say 60%, more than half, experience the little fingers, lower chakras, thumbs, upper, you know. And then when the thing that we all agree on, whether we have whatever our experiences, and the middle finger for sure, you know, the expanse of the solar plexus, but is that I would bet, I didn't ask, but from my experience with most people, when you bring all the fingers and thumbs together, the breath is fuller. It just like, you just feel like the breath enters the full lobes of the lungs. And I remember watching, this is a little bit off subject, but I remember watching a great psychotherapist in a demo at the Psychotherapy Networker, where I usually teach every year. And she was working with a client who was very dysregulated, and his hand gestures were all over the place. By the time she got him regulated, he naturally was sitting in Hakini Mudra. And she knew nothing about mudras. Yeah. So I said to her, you know, his hand gesture is mirroring his state of mind, a fuller, deeper breath, calmer state of mind. So it's really fascinating how these mudras really can have an impact on our well-being and our state of mind. So.
And in this yoga for your mood deck, don't you also have breathing? I mean, it's mudras and more, right? So what else is in there?
Breathing practices and the things that yoga therapists are very familiar with. However, I have the Sanskrit in parenthesis, but my emphasis is on making it accessible so that someone in a disordered eating clinic who has no interest in yoga, or someone in an addictions recovery program or veterans program, can not feel like they're doing something woo-woo or against their religion. So there are mantras. So for example, we'll use the mantra LUM in grounding, usually with a mudra, like a grounding mudra. And that LUM is a sound. It's a vibration, as we know, of the root chakra, Muladhara chakra. However, we don't talk about all that. We talk about just using that sound, not connected with a deity, just a simple vibratory tone. And for example, the sound yam, and we extend the Y to vibrate the heart. We don't talk about its significance in any way other than that it's a tone that vibrates the heart. And we may include like a lotus mudra with yam in the card deck. So they're simple practices with directions on one side, like this one has, it's hard to see the directions on one side and mudras on the other. And like, here's another mudra. This is my hands. You can't really see it because of the light. It's reflecting, but let's see. I can't really. And there are directions on the back. And there's some, Juliet Percival was the illustrator, and she did such a beautiful job. I mean,
gorgeous and very inclusive. I just loved it.
Yeah. And look at this guy. Cool.
Lovely.
Can you see me? Yeah.
Well, I had a couple of thoughts. Number one, I just like to pick a card, and anytime I'm feeling out of sorts and just take 5 minutes. It's like a beautiful 5-minute mini break. But the other thing that I thought a yoga therapist could use them for, or a yoga teacher, is that if you gave it to a class at the end during the meditation, or it was part of someone's practice that you chose Hakini Mudra, they could actually take their phone and take a picture of it. I'm not sure if that's legal with you, but at least they could then go home and do that on their own, and maybe even get their own deck.
Yeah, get their own deck. But yes, absolutely. Making them as accessible as possible is really what I care most about. So yeah. And the way, I don't know if you want me to explain how they work. You can do one card as an intervention, and it's, the color coded. It's kind of a cinnamon for more energizing practice, blue for more calming practices, and green for just staying in balance. Like the other day, I had been in the hot springs in New Mexico, and I was so calm. So I didn't need to energize or calm. I just wanted to stay in balance. So I pulled a green card to just stay in balance. The other way you can use them, if you're extremely agitated, let's say, the breath is short, you're maybe even hyperventilating, you want to meet that mood. You don't want to just go to a calming card. It's like someone telling you, take a deep breath. Well, that's not going to happen. So you use a card that meets you where you are. You pull a red card first, and then each of those red cards has at the end of it how to ground the energy, like a quick body scan and an inhale to crown, I am, exhale to your feet here. So you feel more grounded, and the energy that has been sort of chaotic is channeled, and then you pull a blue card. You're ready to go to the next phase of calming down. So that's one. And the other way you can use them is to create a sequence for yourself. Same one every day or a different one, depending on your mood, how you wake up.
How many total are there?
52.
Okay.
Like a card deck.
You could even do one per, like really practice and meditate on one per week for a whole year. That would
be
Good
idea. Cool. I hadn't thought of that. Yeah.
Because these are deep meditative practices.
They are.
I mean, as much as they're accessible, they do have very deep transformational effects.
Yeah. And I think for me right now, there's so much in our world that we have no control over. And it's really hard to manage our own lives, let alone feeling like we have no control over what's going on around us. So for me right now, I feel that with the number of people, the increase, like from 1 in 10 to 4 in 10 people are experiencing mental health disturbance. And, 56% of our young people, young adults, 18 to 24, are experiencing anxiety, depression, insomnia. And they're having these episodes of increased suicide rates, increased drug addiction, and overdose has
Yeah.
been rampant. So I feel like, I've spent my life really, and not my whole life, but a good chunk of my life, a good part of my career, really working with folks with mood disorders from a yogic perspective, and collaborating with researchers and writing and teaching, and it felt like that I needed to do something more to make it as accessible as possible for our world. So I'm hoping that this card deck sort of is that accessibility, that doorway in, that portal in for people who've never experienced yoga before, and then they seek out, if they can, if it's accessible to them, because in many of the BIPOC community doesn't have the same resources that white middle class community has in terms of yoga classes and mental health resources. So if these can at least be, a kind of a portable solution for a while until they can get access to mental health services or in addition to mental health services, then I feel like I've really contributed something.
Yeah. Well, I just kind of want to go back a little bit because this is your latest project, but you have been in the field of mental health, yoga therapy for decades. I don't think anyone has any idea how many years you've been doing this. You're a staple. You're always around. Everyone knows you, but I'm not sure people know how many decades you have contributed to this. So I'll let you answer that if you feel like it. But let me just tell a little bit about some of the things you've done in your illustrious career. You're the founder of LifeForce Yoga, and you're a pioneer in the field of yoga and mental health. Long ago, in the 1990s, you wrote the first article for yoga and mental health in Yoga Journal called Yoga, the Natural Prozac. You're also the author of a book called Yoga for Depression. You've also written a book, Yoga Skills for Therapists, and you recently wrote a novel called Temple Dancer, which I just loved. And so you've been around a long time writing and teaching. You also work with what's called IFS certified therapist, internal family systems, which is a beautiful, beautiful practice that if we have some time, we could briefly touch on. And basically, you also work for different yoga therapy schools through the C-IAYT certified yoga therapy programs out there. And I'm sure more people will continue to ask you to teach in their programs. And what have I missed? What else do we need to know about you?
Well, I only just to give a shout out to a number of books that I think some of us you and I are both in, So I think Allie Middleton has a new book coming out, Yoga Radicals. I think you wrote the forward for that. She interviewed me for that. And then I've contributed a number of chapters to other yoga therapy books and articles and that sort of thing. And, audio, video products that are downloadable. So that kind of thing. But really, that's enough. And yes,
well, let's get to your story. Specifically, I want to know about yoga for depression, because I think so many yoga teachers, yoga therapists are afraid to talk about their own mental health struggles, which we all have. We want to appear perfect on the pedestal. And You've been a pioneer in saying, I'm not on the pedestal, I'm a work in progress. So can you tell us a little bit about your story around that?
Yeah. Well, I had been a documentary film producer for a while and had a horrible lifestyle. I mean, just not good, not healthy. And I had a pretty severe depression. I was on medication, and the psychotherapy helped me understand family of origin issues, and it was helpful for managing my life. But I was not a happy camper. I was depressed, an anxiety-based depression. And I, I had started meditating early, like when I was 19, I got my first mantra. And I was actually in a much calmer and happier state while I was doing so. But then I stopped at my daily practice, got married, just sort of entered the rat race of work. And I no longer meditated. And even though it had been helpful to me, and I really tanked. And then I started practicing yoga a little bit later with a little book by Richard Hittleman and, the old records. I mean, I go way back. And I started feeling better. And then I happened to pick up somebody's mail for them and saw the Kripalu catalog. And it was only 3 hours from where I lived. This was in the late 80s. And I said, I think I'll go up there. And we were doing yoga on pink, fluffy blankets. There were no yoga mats. And we were doing, the thing about Kripalu yoga back then, and still, but it's a little different now, was that it was really both bhakti, devotional, and lots and lots of prana. So we were doing a lot of pranayama. It wasn't just asana, a lot of pranayama. We were chanting. We were doing things that are, depending on your lineage, aren't necessarily they weren't in the standard, certainly not in basic Iyengar classes at the time. So I just started feeling radiant. And I came home, and there were no yoga teachers in my community, believe it or not. Now there's probably hundreds and hundreds, or, in Newport, Rhode Island, where I lived at the time. And I took home video cassettes, big old thick things, and some audio tapes. And I started practicing on a daily basis. And I felt I didn't need the medication I was on anymore. I felt abundant. And so eventually I was slowly titrated off the medication. And I started going to Kripalu regularly, doing seva and just being there and going to programs. And then I decided to become a yoga teacher in my first yoga teacher training, not as many of us have done, not to teach, but to deepen my own practice. And when I came out of that month-long my first training, I was like, I have to share this. This has transformed my life. It's literally saved my life because I had a suicide attempt. I need to share this. And so I immediately started teaching from the standpoint of mental health, but I didn't call it LifeForce Yoga or anything. I was just, I was teaching Kripalu Yoga, but the things that made a difference to me, the mantras, like the chakra mantras, the basic sounds, and the pranayama and the kriya breathing. I mean, back then I was doing, as for people at Kripalu, forceful Kapalabhati, a lot of it, bellows, breath, Vastrika, lots of powerful breaths, including Uddiyana Bandha and Agni Sara, belly pumping, belly rolling. Now, having the experience I've had over all these years working with people in groups and individually, I'm much more careful about some of those practices. Right. Because if someone has a predisposition for, bipolar with a tendency towards mania or any kind of psychosis, that can set them over the edge. So,
agreed.
So I'm real careful about those practices. And my preference, as is in the deck, I don't have any of those major kriyas like Kapalabhati in the deck. My preference is something that's Anuloma and Viloma Krama, which does have a slight belly pumping effect, but it's mild. And so I call it stair step breath, and it can also be like staged breath. But Anuloma and Viloma Krama which are also in your tradition, I think are a mild enough kriya that can be taught to everyone with supervision and done slowly, not like, if done slowly. And they can actually, I found that they're very effective in like what we call little steps up the mountain. Mm-hmm. So we don't even use like 6 inhalations or 3 inhalations up. We don't even use numbers because we just little steps up the mountain through the nostrils. And then when you say something like that and you do it with them, it meets that agitated state, and then the lungs are full, and you just let it out slowly. You slide down the mountain, or whatever the imagery. But we use a lot of imagery. I use a lot of imagery rather than using 6 count inhalation. Change it to an 8 count. Change it, then come down to 6 count, 4 count. I don't do that. So
I think what you've mentioned twice now is so critical for people to understand, especially about yoga and mental health, is that when someone is in an agitated state, they can't just come down and relax. That once you get kind of up there in the mania or in the agitation or fear or anger, you have to be met there and finding a focus, finding something that you from the inside out can control in that moment and put your mind on, using that to kind of consolidate whatever's going on for you, and then coming down. I think so many people just try to come right down, and it just, when you're that agitated, it doesn't work.
No, that's true. And I think in the LifeForce Yoga practitioner training, trained psychotherapists as well as yoga teachers. I actually don't run it anymore. Rose Crest does. However, a lot of therapists will begin by just, let's just sit and watch the breath just with someone who's agitated. And that can actually increase the agitation. And so what we suggest is getting up out of the chair and pulling some prana. Or doing, the power hara, which we call in the card deck, I think I call it power breath. You stay away from the Sanskrit. So, doing something like that, ha. And the important thing about doing those stimulating breaths is what you do afterwards. It's not just the practice, as you know, it's then allowing the eyes to soften or close and leading a kind of mini body scan, sensing the energy that may be tingling in your left palm, your right palm, your face, So you're guiding them into an embodied state. You're raising their body awareness with a very brief body scan. And then, especially after a stimulating practice, like power hara, doing that grounding. If someone is seated, inhale from seat to crown, I am. Exhale to the seat here. If someone is standing, from the feet to the crown, I am. Exhale here. So it's a way of getting people to feel their bodies, because some people, as you know, especially people who've had a history of trauma, are living from the neck up. So if you just simply said to them, sense into your body. How is your body feeling right now? You may have led a beautiful practice, but all of a sudden there can be a freeze, a kind of like, it's not safe. And it isn't, because their life experience has shown them that paying attention to being in their body isn't safe. So, but this sort of leaps over that frame of mind that tells them that they're not safe if they feel into their bodies, because you're just telling them to sense their palm, the tingling in the palm, sense the fingertips, sense, perhaps the tingling ginger ale feeling in the arm, if you've done something with arms, So you're kind of getting people, that's such a gift for someone who's been living from the neck up, for whom it's not been safe to be in their bodies, to have those windows, those moments of time where they can fully occupy their bodies. That's where the healing really happens.
I don't even think most people who are living from the neck up realize that. That's normal to them. They don't know what it feels like to be embodied. Right. And so it's always a surprise to them, like, oh, I have sensations in my hands or arms or feet, or
it's hard for me to remember that back that far, but I was one of those people.
right. Me too.
And yeah, I was living from the head. In fact, I remember I was in, television broadcasting, and I'd be in a meeting and I might have to pee. And, I would not, I wouldn't listen to my body. I would not. And my body might say, you're tired, go to bed. Forget about it. I had to finish this editing job. It's like, no, yeah.
And that's why Red Bull was invented.
Yeah, right.
All the college students, I see them walking around with Red Bulls, and I know it's because they got 3 hours of sleep and their body wants to rest. So they're just going to jack it up on caffeine. It's heartbreaking.
Yeah. I was somewhere, I was shocked. It may have even, it was some coffee shop, tea shop, went in and there was a Red Bull shake. Yeah. So, yeah.
So I want to get back to anxiety-based depression, because here's another thing I don't think yoga teachers, yoga therapists, maybe even the general public doesn't understand, that there's different types of anxiety and there's also different types of depression. And today I'd like to talk about depression. And so could you describe the difference between like a regular depression-based depression versus an anxiety-based depression? And then maybe talk about what different tools you could use for one versus the other.
Well, what we think of as depression, we think of lethargy, shallow breath, a posture that's curved, perhaps, not straight and full. And when we think, anxiety-based depression, it's more like a rajasic mind, a busy, obsessive mind, and a lethargic body. That's usually the way it shows up. In working with anxiety-based depression, or that rajasic, tamasic sort of state, I always go for the body first, just basically because you can actually do both at the same time. So if you're meeting the lethargy with a slow breath and then building the energy with a breath or a physical movement practice, you're also calming the mind. It just sort of goes in tandem.
Or giving focus.
Giving focus to the mind. So in fact, I practice with mantra, even when I'm doing my asana practice. I use mantra. And it's one way for me to just bring myself present. I'll stop in between sequences or after a pose and sense into my body just the way I teach it. But I'll also, it's not like, sometimes when I'm teaching, I might use more tones and mantras than someone's comfortable with. Like, just let me be in my body. I don't want to be doing all the time. Mm-hmm. And that's a real legitimate kind of concern. You want to be in your body, not doing something all the time. But if the mind's kind of doing its monkey dance and jumping from limb to limb, a mantra and a pose can really help focus. So, whether it's a Virabhadrasana warrior pose with Ram, Ram. There are many poses in which we can integrate. We don't have to talk about all of that, but there are ways in which you use them just enough to bring yourself present, and then tune into the breath, tune into the sensations in your body. I mean, even if we do none of that, yoga is good for us. It's a healthy exercise, but it becomes much deeper and more sustaining for our mind, body, spirit if we can be totally present, or in moments totally present. And for people with mood disorders, even if we're leading something, we're giving them a window through the story. If we're cueing to sensations after a pose, it's that white space. It's a window through the story, the mood. They may tell you they're depressed, but in that moment, depression isn't present. They're feeling that connection. And then, as you can point them in the direction of, this is who you truly are. This is your, sense of self that's unsullied.
That's what I think a lot of us, especially in yoga therapy, are forgetting, that it's about salutogenesis. It's not a pathological model. It's about well-being and feeling good in your skin. And it's not just about not feeling badly, right? That we actually want to flourish and come into our fullest sense of self and connection to the divine.
Yes.
I think when you see yoga therapy, you might think we're only working below the baseline, but the true goal, I think, is to lift up to sattva, and then how are you going to flourish in this life?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, the practices are just the portal in to that connection to spirit, the divine, however you access the divine energy. And I think as yoga therapists, we can offer that in our language. The way I phrase it is sensing the divine as you know the divine. I would only say something like that after a practice where we're feeling open and receptive and tingling, and that sense of spanda, energy and we're feeling that energy. This is who we truly are, beneath the story.
So if you had to choose one, and I know it's impossible, but if you had to choose one yoga therapy tool that gets you or your clients to that state of connection with self, connection with the divine, embodied presence, if you could only choose one, what would it be?
I love doing things in combination, like, pranayama and visualization, bhavana and mantra. But I would say the breath, and the research backs that up, really. I wrote a chapter in Yoga for Mental Health that our colleagues Kelly and Heather edited, and I did it with Holger Kramer, and he's right up there with a number of studies he's done with Shirley Tallis. Not quite as many as Shirley. Nobody's done as many as Shirley, but he's done quite a few. And in his overview of the research, his surveys of all of the research that's been done, he strongly feels that the breathing practices are what are most essential in shifting mood and, elevating mood in terms of depression and anxiety and calming the mood. So I would say the breathing practices.
I think Patanjali's Yoga Sutra supports that too. I mean, it really talks about how the breath is the stabilizer, the cleanser, the preparer to go into meditation, to get into your true nature.
Yes. And, when you think, I'm thinking in Hebrew, it's ruach, means it's breath, and it's also spirit. And what's the word in Greek? But it's the same thing, breath and spirit. Prana, life force,
Yeah.
So I would say breathing practices. And it's important to get up out of our chairs. There's also good research recently that shows that given our sedentary lifestyle, because a lot of us are working at home on computers online, just sitting in front of your computer for hours on end people are showing more signs of depression than those people who get up every couple of hours, so, and do other things,
and move. I mean, you're
move.
so good about hiking and biking and keeping yourself fit. But a long time ago, somehow I got the message after a conversation with Deskachar that meditation was really where it was at, and the rest of it didn't matter as much. And I may have made that up in my head. I'm not saying he said that, but that was my perception. So I really cut back on my physical practice. And after a few years, I got myself into a pretty desperate state of body. And now my teacher, Geeta, who studied with Desikachar for decades, she is kicking my booty. Like I'm in my 50s and she's given me an hour of hardcore asana every day. But I feel so much better, not just in my body, but also depression and anxiety.
Well, yeah, I think I've been told that by masters as well. Well, first of all, the whole age appropriate practice, as we age, we're no longer needing to do asana, in traditional texts. And then as we age further, we no longer need to do pranayama. It's just meditate. It's like meditation is like the pinnacle. And there's also, I've sat at the feet of yoga masters who have said, you can just let go of the practice. At a certain point, you don't need the practice. You're just, in that state. And essentially what you heard from Desikachar, not that he said it, but what you heard.
We will never know.
But I think for those of us who are householders and on a spiritual path, I could not live without movement. I love to dance. I love practicing asanas, and I love lots of physical exercise. It makes me feel good, and there's research behind that. Right. It's important to get up and move, I think. I once worked with a client who had been working with another teacher. She had a history of trauma, and she went to this person who's well known in the field, yoga therapist, and she had her working over a bolster for her primary practice. That's basically restorative poses, bolster poses. The woman tanked. She got more and more depressed. Her body felt awkward and stiff. She started to gain weight. And so she came to me, and we worked with more movement and more pranayama and getting her off the bolster. And she started feeling better. She eventually went to train at Kripalu. It used to be called Dance Kinetics. I think it's called Kripalu Dance. So she totally got embodied and felt much better. So we need that balance.
Right. And, since my little diversion for quite a few years into being disembodied and just in this meditative state, I've now heard the same tradition, Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandram, say, no, all of the 8 limbs of yoga must be done simultaneously throughout the lifespan. Yes. Yamas, niyamas, everything. You can't just drop them off. Yeah. It's assumed that you will continue to do all of them continuously.
I love that. There were so many, when I was sort of at the beginning of my yoga career, which you say has been long, this is the first time I've said this publicly. I just turned 70. So at the very beginning of my my life in yoga, I was now I've lost my train of thought because I can't believe I just told you.
We're not editing that out anymore. Okay. Because I think it's a lovely testament to you and what you've done. Like, I think you should be proud to be 70 and all that you've contributed. I'm so glad you felt comfortable to say that, because people need to know. I mean, you were doing this before this was a thing. It's all popular now, but you were doing it long before.
Yeah, it wasn't, there were, I was thinking about it because when I wrote Yoga for Depression, there were practically no studies out there. Shirley Tellis had one study. It was on uninostril breathing, and it was left nostril versus right nostril. Luciana Bernardi, who's a physician and researcher in Italy, had 2 studies. one on mountain climbers going to Everest and learning Ujjayi breathing first and lower indications of lower altitude sickness, and the other one on mantra that I won't go into. But and then there was an old study from the 70s on brainwave changes through EKG, So there was really nothing. And I went on my feeling. So what I was going to say before, and I kind of lost my train of thought, is that most of the lineages when I started, not Kripalu was sort of its own thing, were saying that there was a ladder, that you climbed the ladder of those 8 limbs. And you had to first, even Iyengar, who changed, he said something very different at the end of his life. And I'll tell you, because I was there when he said it, you must master asana before you learn pranayama. That was how Iyengar was taught back then. I was in Haridwar at a conference that Shirley Tellis ran in 2010, I believe. And Mr. Iyengar was on the stage. We all gathered at the end. And one of the things he said was his teacher, Krishnamacharya, gave him a practice of asana only because he was 13 years old when he came. He had been suffering from tuberculosis. I don't think it was tuberculosis. It was some kind of respiratory thing. So he gave him an asana process. He gave a Desikachar, his son, a completely different practice. And he said, I heard him say, pranayama are good. Pranayama are fine. I was given that practice as a young man, and that's how I taught it, because that's how my master taught me. So I don't know if I've said something that's kind of controversial.
Well, I was going to say, this is the crux of maybe a group yoga class versus yoga therapy, right? That I think a lot of times in a group yoga class, we have a group, we don't know what all their needs are specifically. And we teach what we're passionate about and what we learned, and it helped me. And I want to share it with you. And that's a beautiful, wonderful thing, versus maybe yoga therapy is really tuning into a small group of people or an individual to say, what are your needs? And then I'm going to co-assess with you and pick out the exact tools that I think would be right for your situation. And it might be pranayama, it might be meditation, it might be visualization, it might be asana, it might be going for walks, it might be taking pictures of things to help you with your depression. There's so many tools we could choose from, right?
Right. And even in a therapeutic yoga class that isn't necessarily yoga therapy, once you really have a deeper understanding of what ways are activating of a particular practice. It can be the same practice, but it can be made more activating. I'm going to give you an example, or it can be made more soothing and grounding. As an example, if you're leading a class, you can say, if you want a little more energy in this pose, repeat Ram. So let's say Warrior 2. Rum, rum, rum. So you're getting a little bit of that solar plexus, that belly pumping, a little mild kriya in just doing that. Or if you want to ground it more, or
Lam.
And the energy is really in that first, consonant. So, you can lead a class and give people options, or, right. Even in the breath, if you're feeling sluggish, then maybe make sure you're getting as much inhalation as exhalation, as your exhalation, or maybe increase your inhalation a little bit. If you're feeling the need to calm yourself down, extend that exhalation, so that there's ways in which you can having a knowledge of these practices, you can make them adaptable for a general class, the folks in which you don't know what their basic constitutions are and their, particular mood states.
So, Amy, if a psychologist or a doctor or even a general practitioner came to you and said, what's a reasonable outcome that I can expect from working with you? Like whether you're doing one-on-ones or a group class, what would you tell them as a reasonable outcome? Like, why would they want to come?
Well, I would say, first of all, see how you feel right after the class and see if it makes a difference when you go home in your relationship with your family, or notice the difference. And that you can expect, I don't like expectations, but you can, what's likely, the way I would phrase it, what other people have experienced, and you may or may not, is that this particular practice will make you feel more energy, more open. Maybe you'll be thinking happier thoughts in this particular practice, or so a whole sequence of practices. You should feel right afterwards more calmer and more alert, and just a general sense of well-being that's cumulative. So it may last an hour or two after your first class, maybe 12 hours. But the more you do it, if you do even a little bit every day, it's cumulative, and it'll have longer lasting effects. And that window of well-being will open wider.
And we'll get knocked out of it less. And we can pop back in more quickly. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, I mean, you can use words like, for doctors, like self-regulation and self-soothing and balancing, bringing you back into a homeostasis. And, you can use
reduce your allostatic load.
Yeah, right. Yeah, ventral vagal state increase. You can use all that. And then for ordinary people, you're going to feel a little lighter and brighter, and that's going to increase the more you practice it. And that doesn't mean that life happens. For goodness sakes.
Yeah.
What's happening now? There's always, it seems, something happening now that can ramp us up, ramp up our fear levels. And I think if you have a sustained practice, you're less reactive. Sometimes it depends on your constitution. You may react, but you know how to bring yourself back, or the reaction is less. I think about people I know who have some PTSD. So they're going to be triggered. They're better with their practice, but they still have a short fuse. They're going to react. They're going to be
or their nervous system is going to react even before their mind and their emotions.
Exactly. And that's a long haul to sort of calm that central nervous system down, and to be able to be in a state of be self-regulated when things go down. And we do build our sense of resilience and our inner resources so that we're less knocked over by the waves of life. We are able to coast a little bit.
So I'd like to know from you personally, when you have a crisis or self-doubt or a major disappointment in your life, what is your personal strategy or path forward? How do you usually work with that?
Well, I will do something physical, whether it's just going out and pulling some prana, going outside if I can, nature, and then stopping and breathing, feeling that channel, that how much more open I am. And I will say words to myself like, I have everything I need to manage my life. Whatever it is that I'm feeling the lack of in that moment, clarity flows through me now. Peace flows through me now. But I know, it's been a while, but I have gotten whacked where I feel it in my gut, an unexpected sense of betrayal or something like that. And it takes time, and I have to shake it off, shake it off, do a little practice, get into a place of feeling that channel, or that energy channel, and then breathe the words I need through me. And then maybe use Garuda Mudra, give my heart a little rock, do a little soothing tone like Yam. It's a process, and it doesn't go away like that, but it does start to soften, and I'm less gripped by, say, the betrayal or the moment of deep grief. I don't feel less. I mean, as you know, I feel my feelings. I feel more than I did because I was depressed. I was numb to my feelings. So I feel more than I did when I was depressed. And I know that it passes through me. It's a feeling. It's not who I am.
Right.
And I have that wisdom from my practice.
Yeah. Because you've gone through that cycle enough to know, oh, I'm here again, but I will emerge. This is not the end of the story. I'm not going to stay here forever. It's not going to feel like this every moment. I think that's, with mental health, whether it's anxiety or depression or PTSD, we kind of get locked into, oh my gosh, this is how it's going to be forever. And once we have that daily practice and we pull ourselves out of it, or at least soften it, as you say, we realize that we are self-empowered. We have some tools to shift the mood. And that realization is like, oh my gosh, I can go for a run. I can do some prana pulling exercises. I can do a pranayama. I can do a visualization. There's something inside of me that I can work with this experience I'm having. Yeah.
And I learned the mantra through your lineage, Di, Ri, Ha. And it basically stands for strength. And when you do that mantra, it's powerful. It pumps the belly. And when I learned it, I was in a seated position and it was overwhelming. I mean, we also used visualization with it. And oh my gosh, I was in tears after my 12th Di, Ri, Ha. It was a big, major release. And the image changed from a steady tree, like a redwood, to a teacher in India whom I'd never had a resolution with, who basically was a big stick teacher. And so I did a lot of work with that. And then I embodied it because I couldn't sit there with all that energy. So I did, and one of the cards in this deck is this 5-pointed star to Victory Goddess with an image of power, strength, courage. Di, Ri, Ha. I can't tell you. I use it myself, and I've taught it to so many people who find, like in recovery programs, who find that they have the strength and the courage to just move forward. It really is empowering. So,
and the way that I learned in our same tradition, that mantra is Om Dhiraya Namaha. So that's so interesting to me. I never learned it as Dhiriya. I learned it as Dhiraya.
Wow. Very different. Very different. So that's, it was quite a moment, quite a time when this particular teacher in your lineage came to Tucson, and I spent a couple of weeks. Yeah, very different than Menaka, who I also did some study with. So, yeah.
So you're in your 70s. You've dedicated your
entire 70.
Yeah. You've dedicated your entire life to yoga for mental health, specifically depression. What is it when you are on your last breath and you're ready to release into the larger ocean of Purusha? What is it that you want to know in your heart, that you've done well, you made a difference, or whatever else you want to talk about?
Well, I think it's that I have created environments where there is love in the room, because I think that is the most healing, where there's love in the room. That's it. So through relationship, to be able to know that I've done that. I've made mistakes, Amy. I have things that I feel regret about, and I haven't spent my whole life. I've spent a big chunk of my life from like the 80, well, on and off, but a big chunk of my life devoted to yoga for mental health and to reduce my own suffering and the suffering of my students and clients. And however, I think it's being able to create relationship that's healing, a healing relationship that's more important than the techniques or the, individual cards. It's that relationship. Yeah.
And I love what you said. You've made mistakes. I've made mistakes. I mean, I don't think every single day we wake up perfect and glide through the world. I mean, both you and I are a work in progress.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love that. I love being human and learning and growing and transforming and trying to bring love into the room more often.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Amy, you do such a beautiful job. I love your graphics, and you're so clear as a teacher. I like to watch some of the things that are accessible to those who aren't in your optimal yoga training. And there's such clarity and you pull things together in a way that's so easy to understand for those of us who may not have a scientific brain. It's really good. And when I watch you, like I watched you the other day talking from your heart after your own yoga practice, 5 minutes on your Monday, and there's so much heart and so much love in the communication between you and the folks that you're talking to. You feel it.
And I agree with you. That's where it's at. It's that Vijnanamaya layer where when you get into sattva and you want to connect with another human being, that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
So Amy, we're going to wrap it up pretty quickly here. I want people to know where they can find you, where they can find your new mood deck that's just been released August 10th, 2021 through Sounds True. What are your handles? If you want to find you on Instagram or on Facebook, how can we be in touch with you and be in connection with you?
Yeah, there's on Instagram, I've been doing daily, very casual, wherever I happen to be, practices with the cards, short, and that's at Amy LifeForce Yoga. That's my Instagram.
So every day we could do a little practice with you.
Yeah, I don't know how long that's going to last, but for now, it's what's happening. But they're all on. They get over to YouTube. So my YouTube channel is Amy Weintraub Author. And so all the practices that I put on Instagram find their way within a day to YouTube and also Facebook. But I have both a professional page and a regular page, but I think they're on my personal page.
And that's just Amy Weintraub.
I think so, in Tucson. Yeah. And then the website has a lot of resources, and that's amyweintraub.com. And there is a landing page. I don't think it's hooked up to the banner yet but you can still, there's a place to click on the card deck when you get to the home page that'll take you right to Sounds True if you want to order the cards that way. There's a whole other landing page. I don't have the link to it in my head. So, and it will eventually be on the homepage of the website, amyweintraub.com.
Well, thank you so much for your time today. And it's just a pleasure being with you. I cherish every moment that we spend together. And lately it's been quite a few moments, which I'm so happy about. And just want to say, I'm grateful that you're in my life.
I am grateful that you are in my life, Amy. Yeah. Thank you so much for talking, inviting me on to talk today. It's been a real pleasure.
You've just finished hearing about yoga and yoga therapy for mood disorders, specifically depression. And Amy Weintraub was so generous in telling us about her personal struggle and how she found yoga and used it to transform her life. I think many of us that come to this yoga path of yoga and yoga therapy, that's exactly what happened to us. That we had suffering, as we say in Yoga Sutra, chapter 2, verse 15, that maybe wasn't resolved by a number of other things that we had previously tried. And it was through our personal practice and the reduction in that suffering that this passion or this urge to share it with others, because you feel like, oh my gosh, everybody needs to know about this. My brother calls me a yoga therapy evangelist. And at first I was a little offended, but I thought, yes, that's true. I want everyone to know the power of these simple practices that when you combine postures with breathing ratios or mantras or visualization, with a change of perspective, with all the different tools we have, powerful things happen. And of course, we want to share that. I wish when I was young that someone had sent me to a yoga therapist at 13 years old. It would have saved me 30 years of heartache. When I was young, I think I did have mental health issues. I was very introverted. I'm highly, highly sensitive. In fact, I used to laugh and say, I don't like people. I only like animals. And to this day, my preference is to be with animals. Those of you who know me know that I have many animals. They just keep showing up and I keep taking them into my home. But I'm at peace with my animals. And ever since I was a little girl, that's been the case. I used to go out. Our poor little dog, Princess, lived in the kennel in the backyard. And I used to go and sit with her because I would rather be with her than the humans inside the house. And I'd stick my little hand so that she could put her paw on mine. I'd stick it through the fence, because if you let her out, she would run crazy all over the neighborhood. And I couldn't catch her. So I'd sit there and stick my little hand through the fence links, and then she'd put her little paw there, and I'd sing to her for hours. That was like my favorite thing to do. And now looking back, I realize that the dog Princess and we were co-regulating. We were using each other's nervous systems to, at least it was improving my mental health. I don't know what was going on with her, but I think she liked it. I think we both felt a strong connection. And through singing, I mean, that's like chanting. That's a long exhalation as you say each line of whatever song you're singing. So somehow, even as a young person, I knew what made me feel good. I knew what I needed to do for my mental health. I knew that I got very overstimulated at school and in sports, and that I had to pull inward and just be with myself and take a lot of alone time. I was not the kid that could keep going and going and going. If I had a sport after school, then it was home, eat, and go in your room by yourself, right? And now through learning yogic and Ayurvedic theory, I really understand I was out of balance, probably, I would say in the Vata direction, feeling overwhelmed, feeling overstimulated, needing to kind of shut things down and get quiet and get grounded. I just wish someone had helped me as a young person figure out that path. I was figuring it out by myself, just trial and error and doing more of what made me feel good and less of what made me feel not so great. But if someone could have guided me and said, Amy, here's some postures that might help lift you up or tone you down. Here's some breathing techniques that might help you energize your nervous system and your mind, or relax and ground you. Here's some affirmations. Here's some visualizations, and kind of put it in those categories for me, maybe like a little chart, as we do in yoga therapy, to say, okay, here's your tools that you can use when you're feeling too high. Here's your tools that you can use when you feel overwhelmed or when you feel depressed. that would have been just life-changing for me, to know that people have been doing that for thousands of years and that it's been working for them, and that there's a system that we don't have to guess. We don't have to do trial and error. We can actually look at what the ancient rishis have known for thousands of years and tap into that and kind of take the shortcut instead of the long 30-year plan of figuring it out on your own. So this is why I'm so excited about yoga therapy, is because I feel like it can help people have that shortcut and really start to understand how their system functions, what works for you as an individual, what doesn't work. And here's some tools that you can use to dial up or dial down. So I loved hearing from Amy, someone with decades and decades of experience. And I'm just so grateful that she joined us today. Thank you for listening to the Yoga Therapy Hour with Amy Wheeler podcast. Another nonprofit organization that we like to support through this podcast is the Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandram in Chennai, India. They are the source for the teachings of the Optimal State Yoga Therapy School, and we are so grateful. The KYM's Mitra division offers free yoga therapy training to a large number of socially and economically underprivileged children and women in Chennai. Feel free to support them through the link listed below on Red Circle, and we also have details on our website, which is also listed below. And finally, a special thank you to our team here at Optimal State. We are truly a global family. George Mantuan, one of our executive producers. Adam Satchel, senior media producer and sound engineer from the Philippines. Krishna Panchal, a producer from Canada. Modupe Abdullahi, who does the show notes and is an editor for us from Nigeria. And Peter Morley, who wrote and produced the music for this show, who lives in Australia. Find more about Peter's work at www.zenmusic.biz. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.